Aquinas' fifth argument for the existence of God in the Summa Theologiae is the argument from the intelligible order of the world, and in a certain way it's the argument from final causality, or purposeful order that emerges in things, and how this signifies or denotes a transcendent intelligence. The first thing you have to say when you introduce this argument in the modern context is that it should not be confused with William Paley's argument from design. William Paley famously argues that the universe is a little bit like a watch you find on the beach, and you say to yourself, well, a watch is such an ordered reality, there has to be a watchmaker who designed it. The universe is so well ordered and there's so much intelligibility to the way it's put together, there has to be a divine mind or artist who created it. The problem with the analogy from Paley is that it suggests that the material parts of the watch themselves don't have a principle of order in them, but they have to be given order uniquely from the outside. They're like little material causes that need to be forged. And so Paley's argument sort of suggests that natural reality is underintelligible or underinformed when considered on its own, and you need a kind of external orderer by efficient causality to impose a form on it, like an artifact. And then what happens is that atheist scientists come along and say, well, no, there's order in the world, and so your argument for the existence of God doesn't work, and there's a famous dialectic between these two benighted sides. One side argues that there's order in the world, so we don't need to appeal to a divine order. The other argues, well, the order of the world's underdetermined, so we need to appeal to a divine orderer. But it's actually not a either or, it's a both and the both and structure is what Aquinas takes to argue against people like Paley, you would say today, or people like Dawkins who argue against Paley. So the argument of Aquinas is, if you look at the natural reality around us, it's pregnant with order all the way through. And when he talks about order here, he does mean something like natural form, the formal natures of things, and purposes, if you like. Purposes suggest intentionality, but something more like tendencies, natural tendencies or final causes. Okay, so what am I talking about? Well, a humble example could be something like a water molecule. A water molecule has a kind of natural structure that's different than a hydrogen molecule, and we could call that structure its essence or form. And we could say that those formal natures are what make those things different than, say, a tree or a star or a human being. There's different kinds of essential natures or forms to things. But then they also, by virtue of those forms, or essences or natures, have tendencies that they exhibit, that accrue to them or that derive from them inevitably. So, for example, a water molecule will have an inevitable tendency to behave in this or that way chemically in reaction with other molecules of different kinds, or to act upon other chemical elements in some way or another, and we can measure the effects of water when it's used as a solvent upon this property, this element or that element. Or like similarly, you know, a tree is going to put down roots and put out flowers, and it's going to have predictable tendencies of behavior in terms of how it nourishes itself through photosynthesis and how it grows. And, you know, animals are going to have sensate activity they pursue through learning through touch, and the more complicated animals have memory, and then they pursue mating, and they try to protect themselves by living in packs. And there's going to be tendencies they exhibit based on the kind of nature they have. And human beings have these higher pursuits, like the pursuit of happiness through the search for the truth and the search for love and moral excellence and life in political society together, and friendship and religion. Okay, so you have natures and you have kind of emergent tendencies that derive from those natures. That's in the thing. It's not just imposed from outside for Aquinas, okay? So against Paley, there's a kind of deep structure of natural order. Now, here's the second point. It's intelligible. It's intelligible, and it suggests an intelligibility that isn't put there by us. I'm not making this up. This is not true because I'm saying it. It's true because it's the case. It's the nature of things. You and I don't choose to be the kinds of beings that naturally seek happiness. It's not a choice. Human beings are naturally inclined to seek happiness. No one likes to be lied to. We're not artificially trying to be truth seekers. We're naturally structured to be truth seekers. But in a similar way, I mean, water is naturally oriented towards being a kind of solvent and interacting chemically with other realities in given ways. and trees naturally put down roots and sprout leaves and try to reproduce through seed-bearing properties and so forth. Okay, we didn't make that up. That's how things are. And so there's this deep structure of intelligibility in the things themselves. And Aquinas says, look, when an arrow is headed towards a target and it didn't launch itself, then that means there's somebody who launched the arrow. It's a simple analogy to say when things tend in certain directions that are intelligible, it suggests that there's an intelligence that precedes them. And so his argument is, if the universe is composed only ever of things that have this formal and final causality, intelligibility to them, then there must be some transcendent structure of wisdom, some transcendent source of wisdom that has given them their finite, determinate structures. You can compound the argument by showing that they, by noting that all the formal natural realities we've named interact with each other in a comprehensively intelligible structure. It's the basis of modern science, or for that matter, any kind of traditional philosophy, where we try to understand the structure of things and how they interact with one another. It's intelligible because there are these essences, these properties, and these tendencies that are predictable. So there's a vast network of intelligibility. And that is not derived from any of the things in the network that's intelligible. Even we who are intelligent don't give ourselves, as it were, the laws of our own intelligence to be truth-seeking or happiness-seeking animals. So we need to have recourse to something beyond, as it were, any of the realities that are tendential, teleologically oriented realities that don't cause themselves to be. And that is God, who is, in some mysterious way, transcendent intelligence that gives being to all things, and you could say designs them or creates them as purpose-oriented or tendentially oriented creatures.